The blood on Olivia Reed's feet left faint crimson prints in the dust as she ran, her golden hair whipping behind her like a wild flag of surrender that she refused to wave. Arizona Territory, 1881, the vast sky stretched endlessly above. But Olivia felt only the walls closing in as she fled across the sun-baked earth outside Tonopah. Her brother's shouts carried on the wind, promising retribution for her defiance, for daring to refuse the marriage they'd arranged to settle their gambling debts. The thorns and stones sliced at her bare soles, but the pain was nothing compared to the terror of being caught. "You can run, Livy, but you'll be back." The eldest Reed brother's voice boomed across the scrubland. "Mortimer's waitin', and he ain't a patient man." Olivia's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, the hem of her once fine dress now tattered and caked with desert dust. 3 days she'd been locked in the root cellar after discovering their plan, and now her escape was as desperate as it was foolish. Where would she go? How would she survive? The questions pounded in her head as relentlessly as her feet pounded the earth. As she crested a small rise, she spotted a rider in the distance, tall in the saddle of a magnificent chestnut stallion. Her momentary hope curdled into fresh fear. Another man, another threat, but her brothers were gaining. Choice was a luxury she didn't have. "Help!" she cried, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "Please help me." The rider changed course, spurring his horse toward her with practiced ease. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out the strong lines of his face beneath the wide brim of his Stetson's sharp cheekbones, a firm jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "What in tarnation?" he called, pulling his horse to a stop and dismounting in one fluid motion. His gaze traveled from her bloodied feet to her disheveled hair, concern etching deep lines around his eyes. "They'll sell me," Olivia gasped, struggling to stay upright as her adrenaline began to ebb. "My brothers, they're coming." The shouts grew louder. The rider glanced over her shoulder, his expression hardening as he spotted the 3 men cresting the hill behind her. With one swift movement, he lifted Olivia onto his saddle, her legs dangling against the warm leather. "Miss, get behind me," he instructed, his voice low and steady. "Whatever trouble you're in, we'll sort it proper." "Olivia," she managed, swaying slightly. "Olivia Reed." "Francis Blackburn," he replied, steadying her with a strong hand. "Town calls me Flynn." Her brothers approached, their faces contorted with rage. Jacob, the eldest, stepped forward, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "This ain't your affair, stranger," Jacob snarled. "That's our sister, and she's coming home." Flynn positioned himself between Olivia and the Reed brothers, his stance casual but ready. "Seems to me the lady's in no hurry to return. I count 3 grown men chasing 1 barefoot woman. That math don't add up to anything honorable." "She's promised to Mortimer Hayes," the middle brother Samuel spat. "Got papers signed and everything." "I never agreed." Olivia cried, clutching the saddle horn for support. "They locked me away when I refused." Flynn's eyes never left the Reed brothers, but his voice carried a quiet authority when he spoke. "A woman ain't property in this territory or any other. She's free to choose her own path." The youngest brother, Ezra, stepped forward, his hand twitching toward his gun. "We ain't leaving without her." "You'll run no more, miss," Flynn said softly over his shoulder, then louder to the brothers. "I reckon you boys will be leaving empty-handed today. Unless you fancy explaining to the sheriff why you're hunting your sister like she's escaped livestock." Jacob's face darkened. "You making this your fight, cowboy?" Flynn shrugged, the motion deceptively casual. "I'm making it the law's fight if you push it. Judge Wilson's a good friend, and he takes a particular dislike to forced marriages. Now, I suggest you boys turn around and consider that some debts can't be paid with other people's lives." The tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of the wind across the dry grass. Finally, Jacob took a step back. "This ain't finished, Livy," he warned. "Mortimer won't be pleased." "Your displeasure is no longer my concern," Olivia replied, finding strength in Flynn's steady presence. The brothers retreated, casting dark glances over their shoulders as they disappeared over the ridge. Only when they were out of sight did Olivia allow her shoulders to slump, the full weight of her exhaustion crashing down. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I've nowhere to go." "They've taken everything." Flynn turned to face her, his expression softening. "My sister runs a boarding house in town. She could use help with the cooking and cleaning. It's honest work and you'd have a safe roof over your head." Hope flickered in Olivia's chest for the first time in days. "I can cook, and so, I'm a hard worker, Mr. Blackburn." "Flynn," he corrected, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Let's tend to those feet first, then we can talk about tomorrow." He guided his horse toward a small cluster of cottonwoods where a stream cut through the parched landscape. Helping her dismount, he eased her down onto a smooth boulder beside the water. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her injured feet. Olivia nodded, suddenly shy despite the urgency of their meeting. Flynn knelt before her, gently dipping her feet into the cool stream. The water turned pink with her blood, but the soothing relief was immediate. "My ma was half Cherokee," Flynn explained as he worked. "Taught me a thing or two about healing. There's some yarrow growing nearby that'll help with the cuts." He moved with surprising gentleness for a man his size, gathering the white-flowered plant and crushing its leaves between calloused fingers. The pungent, medicinal scent filled the air as he applied the poultice to her wounds. "Why would you help a stranger?" Olivia asked, watching him work. "You've no stake in this fight." Flynn looked up, his gray eyes meeting hers. "My pa used to say that a man's character is measured by what he does when nobody's watching. But I figure it's also about what he does when everybody is." He wrapped her feet with strips torn from his own bandana, his touch careful and respectful. "Besides," he added with a slight smile, "seemed like you were having a particularly bad day." The unexpected humor broke through Olivia's tension, and she found herself laughing despite everything. "That's quite the understatement, Mr. Blackburn." "Flynn," he reminded her again, rising to his feet. "Now, let's get you to town before those brothers of yours reconsider their retreat." He helped her back onto his horse, then swung up behind her. The solid warmth of his chest against her back offered a comfort Olivia hadn't known she needed, and she found herself relaxing against him as they rode toward Tanapa. "I've nothing to pay you with," she admitted as the first buildings came into view. "Not even shoes to my name." "Payment wasn't offered or requested," Flynn replied, his breath warm against her hair. "But if it eases your mind, my sister Fiona will be grateful for the help. She's been run ragged since her last girl left to get married." The town of Tanapa appeared modest, but welcoming as they rode down the main street. Adobe and wooden buildings lined both sides, with the occasional hitching post occupied by horses whose owners were conducting business inside. A few curious glances were cast their way. A barefoot woman riding double with the Blackburn rancher was certainly cause for attention. They stopped before a two-story white clapboard house with a neatly painted sign. "Blackburn Boarding House." Flower boxes hung from the lower windows, filled with vibrant blooms that defied the harsh desert conditions. A woman with the same storm-gray eyes as Flynn appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sensible knot, but a few rebellious strands framed her face. "Brother, I wasn't expecting you until—" She stopped short at the sight of Olivia. "What's this, then?" "Fiona, this is Miss Olivia Reed," Flynn explained, helping Olivia down from the horse. "She's in need of safe lodging and honest work. I thought of you immediately." Fiona's shrewd gaze took in Olivia's disheveled appearance, lingering on her bandaged feet. Without comment, she stepped forward and took Olivia's arm, supporting her weight. "Well, any friend of Flynn's is welcome here," she said firmly. "Let's get you cleaned up and properly fed. You look half-starved, poor thing." "Thank you," Olivia murmured, overwhelmed by the siblings' kindness. "I don't know how I'll ever repay—" "Hush now," Fiona interrupted. "Flynn doesn't bring strays to my door without good reason. If he says you need help, then help you shall have." As Fiona led her inside, Olivia glanced back at Flynn, who stood with his hat in his hands. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged in crisis but promising something more. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he called after them. "Rest those feet, Miss Reed." "Olivia," she corrected, echoing his earlier insistence on informality. "And thank you." "Flynn." His smile stayed with her as Fiona guided her into the warmth of the boarding house, the door closing on the hardships of her past and opening to possibilities she hadn't dared imagine just hours before. Olivia quickly discovered that Fiona Blackburn ran her boarding house with military precision and a grandmother's heart. After a hot bath that left the water gray with dust and a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Olivia felt more human than she had in weeks. "These should fit well enough," Fiona said, laying out a simple blue cotton dress, undergarments, and a pair of sturdy boots. Left behind by a boarder who married a cattle baron last spring, said she wouldn't need simple clothes where she was going. Fiona snorted. Fancy notions rarely survive the realities of territory life. "They're perfect," Olivia said, running her fingers over the fabric. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by helping with breakfast tomorrow," Fiona replied practically. "I've got 8 boarders who expect eggs and bacon on the table at 6 sharp." Olivia nodded eagerly. "I'll be ready." "Not on those feet, you won't," Fiona countered. "You'll direct me from a chair until those cuts heal. Flynn would have my hide if I let you stand on fresh injuries." The mention of Flynn brought warmth to Olivia's cheeks. "Your brother is a good man." A knowing smile touched Fiona's lips. "He is. Stubborn as a mule and twice as hard-headed when he believes he's right, but a good man through and through." She patted Olivia's hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to worry about everything else." The small attic room was plain but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and a window that looked out over Tanapa. As darkness fell, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, watching the lights of the town blink on one by one. Freedom tasted strange on her tongue, sweet but unfamiliar. Her brothers would return, of that she had no doubt. And Mortimer Hayes was not a man who accepted defeat graciously. The lender held notes on half the businesses in Tanapa, and what he couldn't buy, he bullied into submission. A man thrice her age with cold eyes and hands that wandered during their one forced meeting, the memory alone made Olivia shudder. Yet tonight, she was safe. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight she had a door that locked from the inside, and people who had shown her kindness without demanding anything in return. It was more than she'd had in the 3 years since her father's death had left her at her brother's mercy. Sleep claimed her quickly, and for the first time in weeks her dreams were peaceful. Morning brought the clatter of pots and the rich aroma of coffee wafting up from the kitchen below. Despite Fiona's instructions, Olivia found herself unable to remain idle. Her bandaged feet protested as she made her way downstairs, but the pain was manageable. She found Fiona elbow-deep in biscuit dough, a streak of flour across her forehead. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity as she simultaneously monitored the stove, kneaded dough, and sliced ham for frying. "I told you to rest those feet," Fiona admonished, though there was no real heat in her words. "I've never been good at sitting still," Olivia admitted, reaching for an apron hanging by the door. "Please let me help. I can manage the eggs while you finish the biscuits." Fiona studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a chair pulled up to the work table. "Sit there while you work. It's a compromise." Soon, Olivia was cracking eggs into a large bowl, her movements efficient despite her seated position. By the time the boarders began filing into the dining room, a mix of railroad men, a young schoolteacher, and an elderly retired judge, breakfast was laid out in steaming platters. "New help?" the judge inquired, nodding toward Olivia as she poured coffee. "Miss Reed is staying with us for a time," Fiona answered smoothly, brooking no further questions. The meal passed in a flurry of clattering cutlery and hearty appreciation for the food. As the last boarder departed for work, the front door opened again and Flynn stepped into the dining room, removing his hat as he entered. "Morning, ladies," he greeted, his eyes finding Olivia's immediately. "You're looking considerably improved from yesterday, Miss Reed." "Your sister is a miracle worker," Olivia replied, suddenly conscious of the loose braid hanging over her shoulder and the borrowed dress that fit well enough but was clearly not made for her. "Coffee's still hot," Fiona said, placing a cup before her brother. "I'll just see to the washing up." She disappeared into the kitchen with a knowing smile that made Olivia blush. "How are your feet?" Flynn asked, taking the seat across from her. "Better. Your yarrow poultice worked wonders," he nodded, satisfaction crossing his features. "Good. I've spoken with Sheriff Coleman about your situation. He's aware of the Reed brothers' reputation for trouble and has promised to keep an eye out." Olivia's heart sank. "They'll come back, and Mortimer Hayes has influence with the law." "Hayes holds no sway with Coleman," Flynn assured her. "The sheriff answers to justice, not money." He hesitated, turning his coffee cup slowly. "Miss Reed, Olivia, I don't mean to pry, but knowing more about your circumstances would help me better assist you." The concern in his eyes loosened something tight in Olivia's chest. Here was a man who had already proven his willingness to help, asking not for repayment but for trust. "After my father died," she began softly, "my brothers took control of our ranch. It was small but prosperous enough. They gambled away the profits, then borrowed against the property. I didn't know how bad things had become until 3 months ago when Jacob announced I was to marry Mortimer Hayes to settle their debt." Flynn's jaw tightened. "That's not a marriage, that's a transaction." "Exactly what I said," Olivia agreed bitterly. "Hayes is 60 if he's a day, and his first 2 wives died under questionable circumstances. When I refused, my brothers locked me in the root cellar until I'd come to my senses. I managed to escape during a thunderstorm when they were indisposed from drink." "And you ran straight into the desert with nothing," Flynn finished, understanding dawning. "That took courage, or desperation," Olivia countered, looking down at her hands. "Often the same thing," Flynn said quietly. "My ranch is 10 miles outside town, not large, but it's mine free and clear. I've been working to build something worthwhile these past 5 years. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "I could speak to Hayes directly, offer to buy your brother's debt." Olivia's head snapped up. "No, I couldn't ask that of you. It's a considerable sum." "You didn't ask." "I offered," Flynn replied simply. "And I wouldn't do it without means to cover it. Last year's cattle drive was profitable." The generosity of his offer left Olivia speechless. What manner of man would extend such help to a woman he'd known for less than a day? Before she could respond, the front door burst open, and a young boy of perhaps 12 rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Blackburn, your foreman sent me to fetch you. There's trouble at the south pasture fence line, Reed brothers cutting your wire." Flynn was on his feet instantly. They didn't waste time. He turned to Olivia, his expression grave. "Stay here with Fiona, lock the doors." "It's me they want," Olivia protested. You should stay safe," Flynn interrupted firmly. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're damaging my property now, making it my fight by choice." He donned his hat and headed for the door, pausing only briefly to look back at her. "Trust me, Olivia, I'll return by sundown." As the door closed behind him, Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Her brothers were forcing a confrontation, and Flynn was riding straight into it. Fiona appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Trouble, my brothers," Olivia confirmed grimly. "They're cutting Flynn's fence line." Fiona's expression hardened. "Well, they've made a serious miscalculation there. Flynn doesn't abide trespassers or fence cutters." She moved to lock the front door. "Come help me with the baking. Keeps the hands busy while the heart worries." For hours, Olivia lost herself in the rhythm of the kitchen, measuring flour, rolling dough, slicing apples for pies. The work was soothing, but her thoughts remained with Flynn, facing her brother's wrath on her behalf. The sun was beginning its descent when they heard hoofbeats approaching the boarding house. Fiona went to the window, peering out cautiously before her shoulders relaxed. "It's Flynn," she confirmed, moving to unlock the door. He entered looking dusty and grim, a fresh cut above his right eyebrow and his knuckles raw. "Flynn," Olivia exclaimed, hurrying to him, "you're hurt." "It's nothing," he dismissed, though he didn't pull away when she led him to a chair. "Your brothers and two of their friends thought to intimidate me by destroying property. Sheriff Coleman arrived before things got too heated." Fiona brought a basin of water and clean cloths, which Olivia took gratefully. As she gently cleaned the cut on Flynn's brow, he continued his account. "Your eldest brother, Jacob, made it clear they won't stop until your return to fulfill the arrangement with Hayes. Coleman reminded them that forced marriage is illegal in the territory, but they seem to believe Hayes's influence will protect them. Will it?" Olivia asked, her hand trembling slightly as she wrung out the cloth. "Not from me," Flynn stated with quiet certainty. "I've invited Coleman to dinner. We need to discuss how to proceed." Sheriff Coleman arrived as the boarders were finishing their evening meal. A tall man with a weathered face and observant eyes, he tipped his hat respectfully to Olivia before settling at the kitchen table with Flynn, Fiona providing coffee and apple pie. "Miss Reed," the sheriff began, "your situation is troubling. While I can keep your brothers from outright kidnapping you, Hayes has considerable influence with Judge Parker in Prescott. If he decides to pursue this arrangement through legal channels, claiming breach of contract, things could get complicated." "But I never signed anything," Olivia protested. "I never agreed. Unfortunately, as a woman, your signature might not be deemed necessary if your brothers, as male relatives, entered into the agreement," Coleman explained gently. "It's not right, but it's how some judges still see things." Flynn's hand came down hard on the table. "That's barbarity dressed up as law." "I agree," Coleman sighed. "But knowing the obstacles gives us a better chance of overcoming them." "What if she were no longer under her brother's authority?" Fiona suggested suddenly. All eyes turned to her as she continued. If Miss Reed were married, her husband would become her legal guardian, not her brother's. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Olivia's heart pounded in her ears as the implication of Fiona's words took root. "It would have to be a real marriage," Coleman said slowly. "Hayes could challenge a hasty arrangement as fraudulent." "Of course it would be real," Flynn replied, his voice carefully neutral as he looked at Olivia. "If that were the path chosen." Olivia felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. Marriage from one arrangement to another. Yet this was different. Flynn had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. I need time to think," she managed, rising from the table on unsteady legs. "Of course," Flynn said immediately. It was merely a suggestion, not an expectation. Fiona showed Olivia to the porch, where the evening air helped clear her thoughts. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, pinpricks of light in the vast emptiness. "My brother is a good man," Fiona said quietly, standing beside her. "He would honor any vows he made." "I know," Olivia replied. "That's not my concern. He's already done so much. I cannot ask him to bind his life to mine out of obligation or pity." Fiona's laugh was unexpected. "Oh, my dear. If you believe Flynn's interest stems from obligation alone, you're not as observant as I thought." She patted Olivia's arm. "Consider all options, including those that might bring happiness as well as safety." She left Olivia alone with her thoughts, the night deepening around her. Marriage to Flynn Blackburn, a man she'd known for barely a day. Yet in that day, he'd shown more decency and respect than she'd experienced in years. The alternative was a return to her brother's control, or worse, marriage to Mortimer Hayes. Neither option offered anything but misery. When she finally returned inside, Flynn and the sheriff were still deep in conversation. They looked up as she entered, and something in Flynn's expression, hope carefully restrained, made her decision clearer. "If we were to consider marriage," she began cautiously, addressing both men but looking at Flynn, "how soon would it need to happen? The sooner the better." Coleman replied. Hayes is expected back in town tomorrow or the day after. Once he learns what's transpired, he'll act quickly. Flynn rose, approaching Olivia with measured steps. This is not how I would have chosen to court a woman of your quality, he said softly. But if you're willing, I would be honored to offer my name and protection. And if I'm not the woman you believe me to be. Olivia challenged, needing honesty between them from the start. You know so little about me. I know you chose freedom over security, Flynn answered without hesitation. Courage over submission, those tell me more about your character than a lifetime of formal introductions. His certainty steadied her. Then yes, Mr. Blackburn, if you're offering marriage, I accept. Relief and something warmer flashed in Flynn's eyes. Tomorrow, then, I'll speak with Reverend Howard tonight. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. I'll serve as witness along with Fiona. And I'll file the marriage certificate immediately. He rose, placing his hat back on his head. Get some rest, Miss Reed. Tomorrow will be momentous. After the sheriff departed, Flynn lingered, clearly wanting to speak with Olivia alone. Fiona made herself scarce, mumbling something about evening checks on the borders. I want you to know, Flynn began, that while this marriage begins from necessity, I intend to be a true husband to you in every way. However, he added quickly, seeing color rise in her cheeks, I make no demands. We will proceed at a pace that feels right for both of us. His consideration touched Olivia deeply. Thank you, I would like for us to build something real in time, Flynn smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. As would I. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Until tomorrow, then. He pressed a chaste kiss to her knuckles before taking his leave, and Olivia found herself watching the door long after it closed behind him, her hand still tingling from his touch. Morning dawned clear and warm, the Arizona sky a brilliant blue that matched Olivia's borrowed dress. Fiona had insisted she wear the nicest garment in the house, a blue cotton with delicate white embroidery around the collar and cuffs. Not exactly bridal finery, Fiona apologized as she helped Olivia arrange her hair. But it brings out your eyes. It's perfect, Olivia assured her. In truth, she felt a strange calm. Yesterday's decision, made in haste and necessity, now felt increasingly right. The Reverend Howard arrived promptly at 9, a kindly man with spectacles and a well-worn Bible. Sheriff Coleman followed shortly after, his badge polished for the occasion. Flynn's just finishing up, Fiona explained, straightening Olivia's collar. He insisted on being presentable for his bride. When he appeared, Olivia's breath caught. Gone was the dusty rancher of yesterday. Flynn had trimmed his beard, slicked back his dark hair, and donned a clean white shirt beneath a black vest and jacket. His gray eyes found hers immediately, and the warmth in them chased away any lingering doubts. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, conducted in the boarding house parlor with sunlight streaming through the windows. When Flynn spoke his vows, his voice never wavered. I, Francis Matthew Blackburn, take you, Olivia Jane Reed, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect and provide for you, to honor and respect you in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. When Olivia repeated her own vows, she found she meant every word. This might have begun as an arrangement of convenience, but standing before this good man, she felt the first fluttering of something more profound taking root in her heart. By the authority vested in me, Reverend Howard concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Flynn's hands were gentle as they cupped her face, his lips warm and surprisingly soft against hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise rather than a claim. Sheriff Coleman wasted no time recording the marriage and signing the certificate, along with Fiona and Reverend Howard as witnesses. I'll file this immediately, Coleman assured them. By sundown, it will be official record that Mrs. Olivia Blackburn is under the legal protection of her husband. Mrs. Blackburn. The name sounded foreign to Olivia's ears, yet not unwelcome. I've prepared a small celebration luncheon, Fiona announced, ushering them toward the dining room where she'd laid out cold chicken, fresh bread, and a simple cake adorned with wildflowers. As they ate, Flynn explained his plans. "We'll stay in town tonight. I've taken a room at the hotel for us." Seeing Olivia's sudden nervousness, he added quickly, "To maintain appearances and establish our marriage publicly. Tomorrow we'll ride to the ranch if you're feeling up to it." "My feet are much improved," Olivia assured him. "I'd like to see your home our home." The words felt strange but right on her tongue. Flynn's answering smile confirmed she'd said the right thing. After the meal, Flynn excused himself to see to some business before evening. "I won't be long," he promised. "There are a few supplies we'll need for the ranch." Alone with Fiona, Olivia helped clear the dishes, her mind whirling with the day's events. "He's always wanted a family," Fiona said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Our parents died when we were young influenza. Flynn was barely 17 but refused to let us be separated, worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my head until I could support myself." "He's a remarkable man," Olivia said softly. "Yes, and now he's your husband." Fiona's eyes were kind but serious. "Marriage born of necessity can grow into love, Olivia. My own parents began as a practical arrangement and became inseparable." "I hope for the same," Olivia admitted, "though it seems like asking for too much good fortune after escaping such dire circumstances." "Fortune favors the brave," Fiona replied, squeezing her hand. "And you, sister-in-law, are certainly that." The word sister-in-law warmed Olivia unexpectedly. She'd gained not just a husband but family-to-day family that seemed to value her for herself, not what could be gained from her. Flynn returned mid-afternoon, several packages in his arms. "Shall we, Mrs. Blackburn?" he asked, offering his elbow with a smile that made her heart flutter. The hotel was Tanapa's finest establishment, a 2-story building with actual glass windows, and a dining room that served more than just beans and whiskey. The desk clerk's eyebrows rose slightly at their lack of luggage, but Flynn's explanation about their hasty marriage and plans to depart for their ranch the next day seemed to satisfy him. Their room was modest but clean, with a brass bed, washstand, and small sitting area. An awkward silence fell as the door closed behind them, leaving them truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. "I got you something," Flynn said, breaking the tension as he handed her one of his packages. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Olivia unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a simple but elegant blue calico dress and sturdy leather boots that looked to be her size. "How did you know?" Flynn smiled sheepishly. "Fiona helped with the sizing. I know you need more than just one borrowed dress to your name." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you, Flynn. It's perfect." His other packages contained practical items: a hairbrush, ribbon, soap, and a warm shawl for the cooler ranch evenings. Each item spoke of careful consideration for her comfort and needs. "I've arranged for dinner to be brought up," Flynn explained. "I thought you might prefer privacy tonight rather than the public dining room and its curious stares." Relief washed through her. "Yes, thank you." As evening settled over Tanapa, they shared a simple meal of steak, potatoes, and apple pie. Conversation flowed more easily than Olivia had expected, with Flynn telling her about his ranch, the cattle operation he'd built from nearly nothing, the vegetable garden he maintained poorly, the creek that ran cool and clear even in summer. "It's not grand," he admitted. 3 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it's solid and there's room to expand when needed." "It sounds wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. After the chaos of her brother's household, a simple, orderly home appealed greatly. As the hour grew late, however, the inevitable moment could no longer be postponed. Flynn cleared his throat, glancing toward the bed that dominated the room. "I'll take the floor," he offered, reaching for a spare blanket. "That's not necessary," Olivia said, summoning her courage. "We are married, after all." Flynn studied her face carefully. "Olivia, I meant what I said. I make no demands. A piece of paper doesn't entitle me to anything you're not ready to give. His consideration only strengthened her resolve. I know, and that's precisely why I trust you. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. I'm not suggesting everything all at once, but I see no reason for my husband to sleep on a hard floor when there's room beside me. The tension in Flynn's shoulders eased slightly. If you're certain, I am. They prepared for bed with careful courtesy, taking turns behind a folding screen in the corner. When Olivia emerged in her borrowed nightgown, Flynn was already in bed, blankets pulled to his waist, his broad chest bare in the lamplight. She slid under the covers beside him, hyper-aware of the warmth radiating from his body though they weren't touching. "Good night, Flynn," she whispered as he extinguished the lamp. "Good night, Olivia," he replied, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "Sleep well, wife." The words sent a pleasant shiver through her. Whatever tomorrow brought, tonight she was safe beside a man who respected her enough to marry her before he'd even kissed her. Sleep came easier than she'd expected, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion of the past day's events. And if, during the night, she unconsciously nestled closer to Flynn's warmth, and if his arm gently curved around her in slumber, well, that was between a husband and wife. Morning found them in the same position, Olivia's head resting on Flynn's chest, his arm holding her securely against him. She woke first, momentarily startled by the unfamiliar position before memory returned. Flynn's steady heartbeat beneath her ear was oddly comforting, and she allowed herself a moment to simply appreciate the peace of the moment. When Flynn stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him, a slow smile spread across his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackburn." "Good morning," she replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in years," he admitted, his voice rough with sleep. They rose and prepared for the day, the awkwardness of the previous evening replaced with a companionable rhythm. Olivia donned her new dress, appreciating its perfect fit. After breakfast in the hotel dining room, where more than a few curious glances were cast their way, they collected Flynn's horse from the livery. The chestnut stallion seemed to remember Olivia, nuzzling her palm when she greeted him. "Thunder approves of you," Flynn observed, helping her mount. "He's an excellent judge of character." The ride to Flynn's ranch took most of the morning, the landscape gradually shifting from the town's dusty streets to open range dotted with mesquite and ocotillo. When they crested a small rise, Flynn reined Thunder to a stop. "There it is," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "Blackburn Ranch." Below them, a modest but well-maintained ranch house sat nestled against the backdrop of rocky hills. A barn, corral, and bunkhouse completed the central buildings, with cattle grazing in the distance. A creek wound its way past the house, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. "It's lovely," Olivia said sincerely, taking in the peaceful scene. Flynn's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Welcome home, Olivia." As they approached, a weathered man emerged from the barn, waving in greeting. "That's Hank, my foreman," Flynn explained. "He and two other hands help run the place." Hank approached as Flynn helped Olivia dismount, his curious gaze taking in the new arrival. "Boss, good to have you back." "Things got a bit exciting with those fence cutters, but we've repaired the damage." "Hank, this is Olivia," Flynn introduced, a note of pride in his voice. "My wife." The foreman's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly, removing his hat. "Madam, welcome to Blackburn Ranch." "Thank you, Hank," Olivia replied warmly. "I look forward to getting to know the place." Flynn led her toward the house, a sturdy adobe structure with a wooden porch shaded by a rambling grapevine. Inside, the main room was simply furnished with a pine table, chairs, and a comfortable-looking sofa before the stone fireplace. Doorways led to what Olivia presumed were bedrooms, and at the back a lean-to kitchen was visible. "It's not fancy," Flynn said, watching her reaction closely. "But it's solid." "It's wonderful," Olivia replied honestly, running her fingers along the smooth wooden table. "A real home." Relief crossed Flynn's features. "I'm glad you think so. The bedroom on the right is ours. The other is a small study for now, though it could be whatever is needed in the future. The implication hung in the air between them children, perhaps, someday. Olivia felt a flutter of anticipation rather than apprehension at the thought. The bedroom was simply furnished with a large bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table bearing a basin and pitcher. What caught Olivia's eye, however, was the bookshelf filled with volumes poetry, history, and what appeared to be journals. "You read," she observed, pleasantly surprised. Flynn nodded, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "My mother insisted on education even after formal schooling ended, said a man's mind needed feeding as much as his body." "A wise woman," Olivia said, running her fingers along the book spines. "My father was the same. My brothers teased me mercilessly for my love of reading, but my father encouraged it." Flynn moved to stand beside her, his presence warm and solid. "The house is yours to arrange as you see fit. I want you to feel it's truly your home." "Our home," Olivia corrected gently. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Our home." The days that followed fell into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Olivia took to ranch life with determination, learning the routines and making the house her own. Flynn watched with undisguised appreciation as she transformed the bachelor dwelling into a home. Curtains appeared at windows. Wildflowers graced the table, and the tantalizing aroma of fresh bread replaced the utilitarian meals Flynn had subsisted on. For his part, Flynn proved to be a considerate husband, attentive to Olivia's comfort and respectful of her boundaries. They continued to share a bed, the initial awkwardness giving way to a comfortable intimacy that remained, for now, unconsummated. Each night, they talked until sleep claimed them, learning each other's histories, hopes, and fears. Olivia learned that Flynn had built his ranch through sheer determination after returning from the war with nothing but scars and nightmares. She told him of her mother's early death, her father's loving but strict upbringing, and the bitter disappointment when her brothers revealed their true natures after his passing. "I always dreamed of having my own little piece of land," she confessed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in orange and gold. "Somewhere I could plant things and watch them grow." The next day, Flynn surprised her by marking off a plot near the house. "For your garden," he explained, presenting her with packets of seeds he'd ordered from town. "Hank says this spot gets good sun and the soil's rich." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes at the thoughtful gesture. "Thank you, Flynn. What's that look for?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just wondering what I did to deserve such kindness," she admitted. Flynn's expression softened. "You survived, Olivia. You kept your spirit unbroken despite everything. That deserves more than a patch of dirt to plant flowers in." Impulsively, she rose on tiptoes to press a kiss to his cheek. His sharp intake of breath made her pull back, suddenly uncertain. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," he interrupted, his voice husky. "Never apologize for showing affection. I'm just not used to it." His admission broke something open inside Olivia, the realization that this strong, capable man was as starved for genuine connection as she was. Without overthinking, she slid her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. Flynn stood frozen for a heartbeat before his arms encircled her, holding her gently against him. They remained that way for a long moment, the simple human contact a balm to wounds both visible and hidden. That evening marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Small touches became more frequent, a hand at the small of her back, fingers brushing while passing dishes at dinner, sitting closer on the porch as twilight descended. A week after Olivia's arrival at the ranch, Sheriff Coleman rode out with news. Mortimer Hayes had indeed returned to Tonopah and was furious upon learning of Olivia's marriage. "He's claiming fraud," Coleman reported gravely. "Says the Reed brothers promised you to him, and this marriage was a deliberate attempt to circumvent a binding agreement." Flynn's expression darkened. "That's nonsense. No court would uphold such a claim." Normally, I'd agree, Coleman sighed. But Hayes has influence with Judge Parker. He's demanding you both appear in Prescott next week to address the matter. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Can he truly challenge our marriage? He can try, Coleman replied. But Flynn's right, no reasonable court would void a legitimate marriage to enforce what amounts to a sale of a person. Still, it would be best to present a united front. After the sheriff departed, Flynn found Olivia in the garden, her hands trembling as she tried to focus on planting seedlings. It will be all right, he assured her, kneeling beside her in the dirt. I won't let them take you. What if the judge sides with Hayes? Olivia whispered, her fear palpable. What if our marriage isn't enough? Flynn took her soil-stained hands in his. Then we'll leave the territory, start fresh in California or Oregon, but I don't believe it will come to that. His certainty steadied her. Why not? A smile ghosted across his lips. Because by the time we appear before Judge Parker, there will be no question that ours is a true marriage in every sense. Understanding dawned, bringing heat to Olivia's cheeks. You mean? If you're willing, Flynn said softly. I would never pressure you, but it would strengthen our case considerably if the marriage were complete. The idea sent a flutter through Olivia's stomach that wasn't entirely fear. In the days they'd shared, her attraction to Flynn had grown steadily, evolving from gratitude into genuine affection and desire. I am willing, she replied, her voice stronger than she expected. Not just for legal protection, but because I want to be your wife in truth, Flynn. Relief and something darker, hotter, flashed in his eyes. He helped her to her feet, brushing soil from her skirt with gentle hands. Tonight, then, the question hung between them, laden with promise. Olivia nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs. Tonight. The day passed in a haze of anticipation. Olivia took particular care with dinner, then excused herself to wash and change while Flynn checked the livestock one final time. She donned her nicest nightgown, brushed her hair until it gleamed, and waited nervously in their bedroom. When Flynn entered, he paused in the doorway, his gaze traveling over her with unmistakable appreciation. He'd clearly bathed in the creek, his dark hair damp and his face freshly shaved. You're beautiful, Olivia, he said simply, crossing to stand before her. I'm nervous, she admitted. We can wait, he offered immediately. There's no rush. Olivia shook her head, reaching for his hand. No, I don't want to wait, just be patient with me. Always, he promised, drawing her gently into his arms. His kiss was tentative at first, giving her time to adjust to the sensation. Then, as she relaxed against him, it deepened, becoming something hungry and primal that awakened an answering need within her. His hands remained respectful, stroking her back, threading through her hair, never venturing where she might feel uncomfortable. It was Olivia who took his hand and guided it to her breast, silently granting permission for more. Flynn groaned softly, his touch reverent as he explored her body through the thin fabric of her nightgown. May I? He asked, fingers at the buttons that fastened the garment. Olivia nodded, trembling not from fear but from desire as the nightgown slipped from her shoulders. Flynn's sharp intake of breath as he gazed at her gave her a heady sense of power she'd never experienced. You are perfection, he whispered, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. What followed was a gentle education in pleasure. Flynn proved to be a patient, attentive lover, his experience evident but never intimidating. He guided her through initial discomfort with murmured encouragement and tender caresses, until discomfort gave way to pleasure so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, cradled against his chest as their breathing slowed, Olivia felt a profound shift within herself. This was what it meant to be truly joined to another person, not just physically, but with trust and vulnerability freely given. Are you all right? Flynn asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. More than all right, she assured him, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertips. I never knew it could be like that. His arms tightened around her. It only gets better with time and trust. Olivia raised herself on an elbow to look into his face. Flynn, I need to tell you something. A flicker of concern crossed his features. "What is it?" "I know our marriage began as a practical solution to a desperate situation," she said carefully. "But I find myself having feelings for you that go beyond gratitude or friendship." Flynn's expression softened, a smile tugging at his lips. "Olivia Blackburn, are you telling me you're falling in love with your husband?" The teasing note in his voice gave her courage. "I believe I might be. Is that terribly inconvenient?" he laughed, rolling to pin her gently beneath him. "Tremendously inconvenient, considering I've been falling in love with you since I watched you plant your first tomato seedling with the concentration of a surgeon." Joy bubbled up inside her. "Truly, truly," he confirmed, brushing his lips against hers. "Though I suspect it started the moment you stood up to your brothers with bleeding feet and unbroken spirit." Their kiss deepened, and soon words became unnecessary as they reaffirmed their connection with touches and sighs, their bodies speaking what their hearts had only just learned to say aloud. The journey to Prescott the following week was undertaken with newfound confidence. Their marriage was now complete in every sense, and the days between had only strengthened their bond. They traveled by wagon, taking the journey in easy stages to enjoy the changing landscape and the precious time alone together. Prescott, with its pine-covered hills and territorial government buildings, was a far cry from dusty Tonopah. They secured rooms at a respectable hotel, where Flynn insisted Olivia purchase several new dresses suitable for court appearances. "We want to present the image of a respectable, established couple," he explained as she protested the expense. "First impressions matter with judges." Sheriff Coleman joined them the evening before their court appearance, bringing encouraging news. "Judge Parker may have connections to Hayes, but he's still a man of the law. I've spoken with several attorneys who believe Hayes has no case." The courtroom the next morning was imposingly formal, with high ceilings and heavy wooden furnishings. Olivia, dressed in a forest green dress that emphasized her slender figure, kept her chin high as Hayes and her brothers entered from the opposite side. Mortimer Hayes was exactly as she remembered, a corpulent man with cold eyes and an air of entitlement that made her skin crawl. Jacob, Samuel, and Ezra flanked him like obedient hounds, their expressions darkening when they spotted her beside Flynn. Judge Parker, a stern-faced man with mutton-chop whiskers, called the proceeding to order. Hayes's attorney spoke first, presenting the supposed contract signed by the Reed brothers promising Olivia's hand in marriage to settle their considerable debt. "Your Honor," the attorney concluded, "this hasty marriage to Mr. Blackburn was clearly arranged to circumvent a binding financial agreement. We ask that it be declared invalid and Miss Reed be returned to fulfill her family's obligation." Flynn's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Sullivan, whom he'd retained in Prescott, rose to address the court. "Your Honor, I find it remarkable that in 1881 we are discussing a woman as if she were property to be transferred at will," she began crisply. Mrs. Blackburn was never a party to any agreement between her brothers and Mr. Hayes. She was, in fact, imprisoned in a root cellar when she refused the arrangement, hardly the actions of men confident in the legality of their position. Mrs. Sullivan presented the properly filed marriage certificate, along with affidavits from Reverend Howard, Sheriff Coleman, and Fiona attesting to the genuine nature of the marriage. "Furthermore," she continued, "Mr. and Mrs. Blackburn have established a home together. They operate their ranch as partners, attend church together, and are expecting their first child come spring." Olivia's head snapped toward Flynn, who looked equally startled before recovering quickly, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze beneath the table. It was a calculated risk on Mrs. Sullivan's part. No court would separate an expectant mother from her husband, and the claim would be impossible to disprove in the immediate term. Hayes's face purpled with rage. "She was promised to me," he burst out, rising from his seat. "I paid good money for that girl." His outburst proved to be his undoing. Judge Parker's expression hardened as he gavelled for order. "Mr. Hayes, this court does not recognize the buying and selling of human beings. That practice was abolished by the 13th Amendment." The judge turned his attention to the Reed brothers. "As for you gentlemen, I find your actions in this matter reprehensible. Attempting to barter your sister like chattel is not only morally repugnant but legally questionable." He shuffled the papers before him, then looked directly at Olivia and Flynn. "Mrs. Blackburn, do you freely choose to remain married to Francis Blackburn?" Olivia rose, her voice clear and steady. "I do, Your Honor, with all my heart." "And you, Mr. Blackburn, do you wish to remain married to Olivia Reed Blackburn?" Flynn stood beside her, his hand warm against the small of her back. "More than anything in this world, Your Honor." Judge Parker nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then this court finds no reason to interfere in a lawful marriage between consenting adults. The claim brought by Mr. Hayes is dismissed. Furthermore," he added, his gaze hardening as it returned to the Reed brothers, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into possible charges of false imprisonment and attempted human trafficking." The Reed brothers paled visibly while Hayes stormed from the courtroom, shoving past spectators in his rage. Outside the courthouse, Flynn lifted Olivia into his arms, spinning her in a circle of jubilation before setting her gently on her feet. "We did it," he murmured against her hair. "You're free of them forever." Olivia's relief was tempered by a sudden thought. Flynn, about what Mrs. Sullivan said, about a baby. He chuckled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "A clever legal strategy, though one that caught me by surprise as well. We can clarify the truth to her privately." Olivia bit her lip, gathering her courage. What if it wasn't entirely untrue? Flynn went very still, his eyes searching her face. "Olivia, are you saying?" "I'm not certain," she admitted. "It's too soon to know for sure. But I'm late and I've been feeling different." Joy bloomed across Flynn's features, transforming him. "A baby, our baby," Olivia nodded, her own happiness bubbling up to match his. "Possibly. We'll know more in a few weeks." Flynn gathered her close, mindful of curious onlookers but unable to contain his emotion. "Whether it's true now or later, Olivia, nothing would make me happier than building a family with you." They returned to the ranch 3 days later. The shadow of Hayes and the Reed brothers finally lifted from their lives. News arrived from Sheriff Coleman that all 3 brothers had fled the territory ahead of the district attorney's investigation, presumably heading for California or Oregon. As summer gave way to autumn, Olivia's suspicion was confirmed. They were indeed expecting a child in early spring. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, with Flynn expanding the cattle operation while Olivia's garden provided fresh vegetables and herbs that became the envy of neighboring ranches. Flynn proved to be as attentive to Olivia's pregnancy as he was to every other aspect of their life together. He expanded their bedroom, built a nursery adjoining it, and constructed a comfortable rocking chair where Olivia spent peaceful evenings watching the sunset, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed one December evening as they sat before the fire, snow falling gently outside. "To think I might never have met you if I hadn't run barefoot into the desert." Flynn pressed a kiss to her temple. "Some things are meant to be, I believe. Though I wish your path to me had been less painful." "The pain makes the joy sweeter," Olivia replied, placing his hand where their child kicked vigorously. "And it brought me you and now this little one. I wouldn't change a moment." March brought the first wildflowers and their son Matthew James Blackburn, born during a gentle spring rain with Fiona and the midwife attending. Flynn paced the porch until his sister emerged with the news, then entered the bedroom with trembling steps to find Olivia cradling their newborn. "He has your eyes," Olivia whispered as Flynn knelt beside the bed, awestruck by the tiny perfection of their child. "And your strength," Flynn replied, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. "He's magnificent, Olivia, as are you." Life settled into a new rhythm with Matthew's arrival. The baby thrived in the clean desert air, growing sturdy and strong under his parents' devoted care. Fiona visited often, delighting in her role as doting aunt and bringing news from town. Hayes left the territory, she reported during one such visit when Matthew was 6 months old. Apparently, his business interests suffered after the courthouse incident. Too many people heard him admit to trying to buy a wife. "Good riddance," Flynn said firmly, bouncing his son on his knee. That evening, after Matthew was asleep in his crib, Flynn led Olivia to the porch where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses awaited. "What's the occasion?" she asked, settling beside him on the bench he'd built for them. "1 year ago today," he explained, pouring the wine, "a barefoot woman ran into my life and changed everything." Olivia's eyes widened. "Has it been a year already?" "The best year of my life," Flynn confirmed, raising his glass in toast. "To the day you stopped running." Olivia touched her glass to his. "To the day you said I'd run no more and gave me a reason to stay." As the stars emerged above Blackburn Ranch, Flynn and Olivia sat contentedly together. The distance between the desperate Barefoot woman and the Hayes brothers' captive now measured not just in miles, but in the boundless joy of a life freely chosen and richly lived. In the years that followed, the Blackburn family grew along with their ranch. A daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, joined them 2 years after Matthew, followed by twin boys James and Thomas in 1885. Flynn expanded the house to accommodate their growing family, adding rooms and eventually a second story that offered sweeping views of the land they'd made prosperous through shared labor and love. Olivia's garden expanded into an orchard that produced apples and peaches coveted throughout the county. Flynn's cattle operation became one of the most successful in the territory, his reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spreading far beyond Arizona's borders. Occasionally, news would reach them of the Reed brothers. Jacob died in a saloon fight in San Francisco. Samuel found religion and became a circuit preacher in the Dakota Territory, and Ezra eventually settled in Oregon as a shopkeeper. None ever attempted to contact Olivia, perhaps wisely. As for Mortimer Hayes, he suffered financial ruin after a series of poor investments, eventually returning to Boston, where he died alone and largely unmourned. His passing merited only a brief mention in the Tonopah newspaper, a footnote in the history of a town that had long since moved on. By 1901, as a new century dawned, Blackburn Ranch had become a landmark in the now state of Arizona. Matthew, at 20, showed every indication of following in his father's footsteps, with a natural affinity for ranching and his father's steadfast character. Sarah, 18 and headstrong like her mother, had her sights set on attending the university in Tucson, a plan her parents fully supported. The twins, 16 and inseparable, divided their time between schooling and helping on the ranch, their youthful energy a constant reminder of time's swift passage. On the 20th anniversary of their meeting, Flynn surprised Olivia with a gift, a delicate gold locket containing a small painting of the family on one side and on the other, a pressed desert wildflower. "From the spot where I first saw you," he explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Running barefoot and fierce as a desert storm. Who would have thought that desperate flight would lead to this?" Olivia mused, looking out over their land where their children played under the same vast Arizona sky that had witnessed their beginning. Flynn's arms encircled her from behind, his embrace as secure and comforting as it had been since the first night they'd shared. "I knew," he murmured against her hair, now threaded with silver but still as golden as the day they met. "From the moment you stood up to your brothers with bleeding feet and unbroken spirit, I knew you were a woman worth building a life with." Olivia turned in his arms, meeting the lips that had spoken those life-changing words 2 decades earlier. "You'll run no more," and she never had.